Why does Lindy Ruff make constant changes to the lineup when he doesn't have to? And let's talk about the goalie debate between Akira Schmid and Mackenzie Blackwood. And there's a certain player, a newly acquired player, that should be an everyday player for the New Jersey Devils. We have a lot to talk about in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credentialed media member, Trey Matthews. So what's been the talk of the town as of late? It's been the constant lineup changes by Lindy Ruff. Why is he rolling with this line? Why is he scratching this player? What's going to happen to the goalie tandem once Mackenzie Blackwood returns to injury? Because according to Amanda Stein, Mackenzie Blackwood is back to skating, and it's only a matter of time before he suits back up in a Devils uniform once more. So a lot of people are wondering, do we want Mackenzie Blackwood back? Should Akira Schmid just remain as the backup, whatever the case might be? So we're going to talk about it in today's episode. And I'm also going to add my own flair to it in the final segment, because I think there's a certain player, a newly acquired player that the Devils have on their roster that needs to be an everyday player. So to start things out, let me send a message to Lindy Ruff. So my thing is, like, I wish I was back at the Prudential Center. I wish the Devils came back to Arizona once more, so that way I can ask Lindy Ruff myself as to why he's making these certain changes to the lineup, because there's this old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what do I mean by that? Consistency is key, especially with a winning team like the New Jersey Devils, because obviously they're destined to make the playoffs. It's a sprint dash to the finish line. Playoffs are just right around the corner. We only have a few weeks remaining in the regular season. So why is Lindy Ruff making these adaptations when you don't need to? Because my thing is simply this: you know what works. So the example that I want to use is that let's go back to that 13-game win streak that the Devils had in the first half of the year. What line combinations were they rolling out for the most part? So on their top line, usually it was Bratt, Hischier, and Zetterlund. Second line, it was Hala, Hughes, and Tatar. Third line, it was Boquist, Sharangovich, and Mercer. And then the fourth line was the BMW line, Bastian, McLeod, and Wood. And that was working for the Devils. So you didn't see many changes with the Devils lineup. Maybe sometimes you would see Alexander Holtz inserted into the lineup. Then on the defensive side of things, it more or less was the same. So you had Jonas Siegenthaler, Dougie Hamilton, Ryan Graves, John Marino, Damon Severson, Brendan Smith, and sometimes Kevin Ball would be subbed in here and there. But that more have happened in late December when the Devils were struggling and when Kevin Ball was getting more chances to perform at the NHL level. But digressing a little bit, and I know you need to factor in that Andre Palat was still injured at the time, because remember, Andre Palat, he just came off of groin surgery, so he was not with the Devils during their 13-game win streak. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But I just want to use that example as, like, consistency is usually a good thing. So my thing is like you had a good plan formulated, so stick with that. And it still applies to this day and age, because obviously things have changed on the Devils roster. So Zetterlund was dealt away. Kevin Ball seems to be performing really well. And my thing is, I kind of prefer Kevin Ball right now over Brendan Smith. Andre Palat is obviously back in the lineup. He returned to injury early January. Then Timo Meier was traded over to the Devils organization just like a week or two ago. So my thing is, like, I know things are changing amongst roster personnel, but you still can maintain that consistency. So you don't need to make changes to the lineup when you don't have to. So my thing is simply this: look at that game against the Carolina Hurricanes. What happened? Jesper Bratt started on the third line. However, when he was paired alongside with Jack Hughes, what happened? We saw the great tandem between Bratt and Hughes, and Jesper Bratt was able to score a couple times, and Jack Hughes was playing aggressive defensively. Like, he was pit-pocketing the Carolina Hurricanes, and he was setting up Jesper Bratt beautifully. And also Timo Meier. One of the examples I used, courtesy of James Nichols, was like, look at the expected goals for Timo Meier. He was actually leading the Devils in that category despite not finding the back of the net. So it seemed like Timo Meier was finding his niche just a little bit. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, like, why isn't Timo Meier scoring like 3 or 4 or how many goals throughout the course of these last few games, wherever the case might be? I said, give Timo Meier some time. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, that worked. Like, that Jesper Bratt, Jack Hughes, and Timo Meier line worked for the time being. So keep it that way. What happens in the Tampa Bay Lightning game? We see Jesper Bratt start off on the third line once more. Why is Jesper Bratt remaining on the third line when you see that the chemistry between him, Jack Hughes, and Timo Meier was starting to come into fruition just a little bit more? So a few episodes ago, I talked about, like, I'm okay with Jesper Bratt being on the third line, but once Jack Hughes and Timo Meier start to get that chemistry going a little bit, you might want to insert Jesper Bratt back onto that second line. So that's my mindset for Lindy Ruff, which is when something seems to be working well, keep it that way. That's what happened during the 13-game win streak. And I know Andre Palat and Timo Meier and Zetterlund is gone, and also Kevin Ball seems to be coming into his own. I know things are changing a little bit, but it's not changing to the point where you can't maintain that overall consistent lineup, and you can roll with that come playoff time. And another thing I want to talk about is that I don't think Kevin Ball should be a one game, one scratch, one game, one scratch kind of player. I think Kevin Ball has earned the right to get more consistent starts. So how is he going to get the consistent reps if he's a scratch every 2 games or so? So that's my thing. I think Kevin Ball has deserved an everyday spot for the time being. Who would he be replacing? He would be replacing Brendan Smith in that aspect. And I think if you ask any Devils fan for the time being right now, I think they're going to take Kevin Ball over Brendan Smith. So an example I want to also bring up is, remember when we were talking about how Dawson Mercer was playing on the third or the fourth line, whatever the case might be, you give him a chance, you bump him up to a bigger role, you're going to see a bigger sense of production from Dawson Mercer's end. And what happened? Dawson Mercer played lights out. He went on a long points streak. He was able to, score a goal in 8 or 9 straight games or so, somewhere in that ballpark. So we saw the surgence of Dawson Mercer. And I think the same can be said for Jesper Bratt, because we were starting to see him become a little more consistent, especially when he was paired alongside with Jack Hughes. And the same can be said for Timo Meier. So that's my thing for Lindy Ruff, which is you have the tools to remain consistent. I know changes are happening amongst the organization. I know playoffs are right around the corner, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You don't need to make those adjustments in that sort of way. Now, you do need to make more adjustments from a mental aspect, because we need to see the Devils have more of a sense of urgency when things don't go their way. I know that they're currently leading the NHL in come from behind victories, but if that Tampa Bay Lightning game showed me anything, is that the playoffs are going to be a whole new different animal, and the best of the best teams, they're not going to take any prisoners, and the Devils won't get many scoring options. So that's the point I want people to take into consideration, which is come playoff time, especially when the Devils are playing against these good defensive-minded teams, they can't always rely on their miraculous comebacks to bail them out of it, because those teams aren't going to give them a single inch of breathing room. So if you have a chance to go up ahead early, you need to maintain that. So the name of the game for Lindy Ruff and the Devils organization moving forward is consistency when it comes to the lineup, because that's what I want to see. I don't want to see these constant lineup changes. So you keep Tatar, Keisher, and Mercer on the same line. That's great. Keep it that way for Meier, Bratt, and Hughes, because we just saw Bratt and Hughes have great chemistry in one of the biggest games of the year because of what it meant. And also Timo Meier seemed to be somewhat comfortable. So that's my overall thing for Lindy Ruff moving forward, which is consistency is usually a good thing, and make the right decision. Don't make the decision based on seniority, and that's the case for Brendan Smith. I feel as though Kevin Ball's getting the short end of the stick because of seniority privileges by Brendan Smith, because as established when Christy Flannery appeared on the show, she said that Brendan Smith is beloved in the locker room. He's a veteran leader. Now, personally, I've never had the chance to speak with Brendan Smith, so I'm going to take Christy Flannery's word in that sort of aspect. But my thing is, I think Brendan Smith needs to be a healthy scratch more often, and Kevin Ball deserves to be an everyday player. Okay, so here's a big debate. Who should be the backup goalie? Should it be Mackenzie Blackwood or Akira Schmid? Because here's the thing. My overall opinion is simply this. You can't go wrong either way, because Akira Schmid, He's been performing well this year. And Mackenzie Blackwood, despite his injury struggles once again, and despite sometimes not getting the benefit of the doubt when the team in front of him isn't producing enough defense or offense, Mackenzie Blackwood is still a solid netminder for the Devils. So this year for Mackenzie Blackwood, he has a record of 8-5-2. He has a goals against average of 3.04 and a save percentage of 900. Then when looking at Akira Schmid, he has taken leaps and bounds of improvement, and he's only 22. He has a record of 8-4-1. He has a goals against average of 1.91, one shutout, and a save percentage of 927. So my thing for Akira Schmid and Mackenzie Blackwood is that it's an interesting case because, like I said, you can't go wrong either way. So do you go with the young and upcoming goalie who has a bright future in Akira Schmid? Because keep in mind, Akira Schmid, like I just said, he's only 22 years of age. Mackenzie Blackwood is 26. So I know Mackenzie Blackwood might not be the most experienced goalie, but he's been around the block a few more times than Akira Schmid. And I'm sure come playoff time, the Devils are going to rely on that just a little bit more. But it's just like, my thing for Akira Schmid is just like similar to what Lindy Ruff said about Alexander Holtz. Seems like the success of the Devils might be the detriment to Akira Schmid because, unfortunately, like I said about the Brendan Smith scenario, I think the Devils might go for seniority in this case, and they might lean back into the favor of Mackenzie Blackwood. Because here's the thing about Mackenzie Blackwood. Like I said, still a solid player, not the best in the world. But at the same time, let's face it, Mackenzie Blackwood has run into bad luck this year, as in sometimes the defense in front of him hasn't really helped him. Sometimes Mackenzie Blackwood has to make 40 saves just to keep the Devils in the game. And unfortunately, he comes away on the losing end. So my thing is simply this, which is I think when Mackenzie Blackwood returns to injury, regardless of which goalie you want to be the backup, I still think it's going to go into the favor of Mackenzie Blackwood, similar to what I said when Mackenzie Blackwood returned from injury the first go around, because this isn't the first rodeo in terms of Mackenzie Blackwood injuries and goalie stepping up in his absence. So he already lost his starting position to Vitek Vanecek in my eyes. And now it was a question like, who was going to be the backup? Was it going to be Akira Schmid? Was it going to be Mackenzie Blackwood? And unfortunately, in this case, seniority just played a factor. Mackenzie Blackwood was given the backup role, and Akira Schmid was sent back down to Utica. Now, from my personal standpoint, here's where I stand. I think Akira Schmid, he has a very bright future, but I don't want to thrust him into a role that he's uncomfortable with. So my thing is simply this. Like I said in the first segment, the playoffs are right around the corner for the Devils. And Akira Schmid is only 22 years of age. And like I just said moments ago, he has a really bright future. But my thing is, like, I don't want to put him into that position that gets him nervous, that gets him flustered, whatever the case might be. Because here's another thing that some of you might not be aware of. But when I talked to Akira Schmid during the course of when I was credentialed in the month of December and parts of January, Akira Schmid was brought back up to the Devils organization at the very last minute because Mackenzie Blackwood got hurt during morning skate. So Akira Schmid at around noon was given the call back up to the Devils organization, and he had to start that night. So when I talked to him, because he didn't seem like himself, he admitted he got a little nervous. Now, keep in mind, this is the second time he's been brought up to the club. It's not a game 7 win or go home game. It's not a must win game. There's really no pressure for Akira Schmid to perform, all that well. Like there's nothing riding on it except maybe pride at the end of the night. But Akira Schmid admitted to me that he got a little nervous. So that told me right there that Akira Schmid is still young. He's still trying to develop. So let's be patient with him. We don't need to thrust him into this big role because let's face it, this is culture shock amongst the entire Devils organization, going back to the playoffs and now having a legitimate chance to maybe be a deep playoff team. Now, how do they fare in the playoffs? I don't really know. We're just going to have to wait and see, like I've been saying the last couple episodes. But here's what I do know. Akira Schmid has a bright future. He's been performing lights out this year. His improvement is through the roof. It's flabbergasted not only myself, but I think a lot of other people who cover the Devils. I'm sure the Devils organization didn't expect Akira Schmid to be this good. But at the end of the day, he's still young. He's still trying to figure out his way in the NHL. And he admitted that he got a little nervous. Now, I just want to say Akira Schmid is probably one of the sweetest guys I've ever interviewed. He's so nice. He's so soft-spoken, and he's a really nice guy, and I enjoyed speaking with him. But the fact that he admitted to me that he was nervous, I think it just shows that he needs just a little bit more time before we get him into that position. So I don't want to set Akira Schmid up for failure. That's my thing. Like, let's develop him at our own pace. So let's just let Mackenzie Blackwood do the backup roles, because let's face it, do we think Mackenzie Blackwood is going to be here next year? I don't personally foresee it, because once again, he's dealing with injuries once more. Akira Schmid is on the rise, and Vitek Vanecek, I think, regardless of how bad he's been struggling the last few games or so, I think Vitek Vanecek is still the number one option for the Devils moving forward. And if that game against the Carolina Hurricanes didn't solidify it, I don't know what else will. So Vitek Vanecek is the starter come next year. I think Akira Schmid might be thrusted back into that backup role. And I don't know what the future holds for Mackenzie Blackwood, but I'll tell you one thing. I certainly don't feel comfortable re-signing him to a 3-year extension. I don't care how cheap it is, because Mackenzie Blackwood, he either performs at expectations or just below it, and he gets injured too much. And the thing is, you don't want to meet expectations. You want to exceed them. So that's where I stand with the overall debate between Akira Schmid and Mackenzie Blackwood, which is Akira Schmid is, by the numbers, is the better goalie. But at the same time, when it comes to mentality and things of that nature, I think he just needs some more time before we actually put him into the backup role, especially this late, especially with playoffs right around the corner. Let's not set the kid up for failure. I think that Mackenzie Blackwood is still going to be the backup going forward for the Devils. And Akira Schmid, come next year, I think he will definitely be ready. Now, before we talk about the player that I feel as though should be an everyday player, I want you guys to make some extra cash. So I'm going to send you over to FanDuel. So the midway point of the NBA season is here. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's a bonus bet back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. You know the drill. Visit our friends at Locked On Bets for all your betting needs there as well. And always please remember to gamble responsibly. And I want you guys to eat a little healthier and happier. So I'm going to tell you about Built Bars. So looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. You got through the holidays, and I know one of your goals is to eat healthier. So I'm going to tell you more about Built. So with Built Bar, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think that they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. Not sure how Built does it, but somehow, some way, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're at Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Okay, so I know there's a joke going around Devils Twitter, courtesy of the Brat Pack, saying like, where is Curtis Lazar? Is he real? The conspiracy is that Curtis Lazar is not a real player. The Devils didn't actually get him. That's fun and all, and I get the overall joke, because Curtis Lazar did have trouble entering the States because of visa issues. He was able to join the team in Montreal, and now I think Curtis Lazar, all the visa issues have been resolved, because he did suit up in the previous home game against the Tampa Bay Lightning when Nathan Bastian was listed as day-to-day. Now, here's the thing. I think Curtis Lazar deserves to be an everyday player, and here's why. For starters, Tom Fitzgerald explicitly said he was trying to add more grit to the lineup. And Curtis Lazar, in my eyes, is the perfect example. So when we first got Curtis Lazar from the Vancouver Canucks, I talked about it in the episode when we first got him. But if you need a refresher, so he scored 3 goals, 2 assists with a 14 minutes in the penalty box and 45 contests. So his 51.9% on faceoff win percentage actually ranked second on the Canucks. And he was third in hits with 124. And his total of blocked shots was 49, which was second amongst Canucks forwards. So let me repeat that again. 124 hits. That was third on the team for the Vancouver Canucks, and his block shots of 49, second amongst Canucks forwards. So you want a gritty player? I think Curtis Lazar is your guy. And we saw him have a big hit on Victor Hedman. So when I asked Curtis Lazar, like, what does he bring to the team? He says, don't expect anything too flashy, but he's a meat and potato kind of player. So, and that's his words, not mine. So I think that's the perfect kind of player to have on your fourth line, because Curtis Lazar, I talked about Timo Meier having a high hit total, and it was more than a lot of Devils players combined. Curtis Lazar surpasses that. He now leads the Devils in hits by default. So my thing is, like, you can use that on your bottom four. Now, who does he replace? Does he replace like Miles Wood, Nathan Bastian? Oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this, but I think Miles Wood would have to be the odd man out in this case, because there's no guarantee that Miles Wood will be back next year either, similar to Mackenzie Blackwood, but that's a debate for another time. So my thing is, like, I think Curtis Lazar needs to be an everyday player for the Devils because he adds that toughness, he has that grit to our bottom six. And I think that's what's been missing when the Devils were struggling like a month or so back. So add that to your bottom six, and I think the Devils will have more options up and down their lineup, because while Curtis Lazar is not going to be a high goal scorer, he's not going to be flashy, he's not going to do this, that, or a third, I still think that he can contribute on the blue collar kind of way, because it's similar to why Eric Holla was on the same line as Jack Hughes, is because a lot of people weren't aware as to what Eric Holla brought to the Jack Hughes line, because people were saying, like, Eric Holla doesn't perform, he doesn't score, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. And when asked about it by James Nichols, Lindy Ruff said in a post-game press conference, the reason why Eric Holla remained on the same line as Jack Hughes, because Eric Holla, he can manage face-offs, he can play tough, he can do the dirty work, so that way Jack Hughes doesn't have to. And obviously Jack Hughes is the best player on the team, so you need that protection around Jack Hughes. Now Timo Meier gets to carry that torch in that sort of way, but I think Curtis Lazar can do the same thing on the bottom six, which is do the tough, gritty work, win the face-offs, things of that nature, because the stats might not show it, but both Curtis Lazar and Eric Holla, and there's a reason why they're best friends, apparently, when they were both playing on the Boston Bruins, their impact might not be noticed by the casual hockey fan, but if you watch the game and you see the success that the Devils hypothetically could have, they're huge X factors. So that's my thing. So we saw Eric Holla do it for Jack Hughes, and I still think that, and even though I wasn't aware of it at the time, I think a large part of Jack Hughes' success was because of Eric Holla, doing that dirty work, and basically Jack Hughes is free to do whatever he wants to do. So I think Eric Holla inadvertently played a role in Jack Hughes' success, but he's not going to be given the credit. So Curtis Lazar can do the same thing, maybe not to the same magnitude, but he can do the hits, he can do the block shots, he can do the face-off. And I talked about with Jersey Joe, like, if Curtis Lazar is able to show out, then quite honestly, there's no guarantee that Michael McLeod or Miles Wood will be back on the roster come next year. So I think Nathan Bastian remains in the lineup, but it's a matter of, like, who do you put Curtis Lazar in for? So is it Miles Wood, Michael McLeod, whatever the case might be, because I don't want to break up the BMW line, but at the same time, I don't think that Curtis Lazar deserves to play on the third line with Andre Palat, Eric Holla, and Jesper Bratt, because let's face it, you're not going to scratch either one of those players. So it's unfortunately odd man out, and the bass player in the band, Miles Wood, Michael McLeod, those are your options. So I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. So leave a comment down below. Like, do you think Curtis Lazar should be an everyday player? What's your opinion on the Akira Schmid and Mackenzie Blackwood debate? And what are your thoughts on Lindy Ruff changing his lineup constantly? Because personally, I don't think he needs to make a change when he doesn't have to. He doesn't need to adapt in that sort of aspect. So leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal Twitter page at TreyMatt4 or the show's Twitter page at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.